Hi, everyone. My name is Kurt Bachman, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dish. Today, I'm honored to speak with John Lehndorff, an acclaimed Colorado-based food writer, radio host, and editor. To give you a little background on John, he's chronicled the blossoming of Colorado's food, drink, and fare since the late 1970s. Currently, John is the food editor of the Boulder Weekly, penning the Nibbles column. He has written almost weekly since 1985. For more than 25 years, he's hosted the Radio Nibbles show on KGNU FM. But it doesn't stop there. John is also the food editor of Colorado Avid Golfer magazine and has contributed to other leading publications such as Washington Post, Bluegrass Unlimited, USA Today, Food Network magazine, and more. As a former restaurant cook, caterer, and cooking teacher, he's reviewed more than 400 restaurants as the dining critic for the Rocky Mountain News. He's also a self-described pie expert and former spokesperson for the National Pie Day, director of the Great American Pie Festival, editor of Pie Times magazine, and head judge at the National Pie Championships. Listen as we chat about how John became an award-winning food writer and editor, his best tips on starting this type of career, and how he became pie expert. And there he is. Good morning.
Good morning, Kirk. How are you?
I'm great, buddy. If I was any better, I'd be you. Honestly, I'm sensing there's some pie somewhere around the corner, right? Who knew? Who knew?
Who knew that there was this pie subculture all over the world that wanted to stay connected. It's a beautiful thing.
It really is, right? So many times, I have to be perfectly honest, you'll go to a beautiful restaurant for dinner and, oftentimes it's the standard creme brulee, maybe the kids have some ice cream, but boy, do my ears perk up if I hear, a cobbler or a pie is available on the menu because it's so rare and so beautiful, right? Maybe throw a little ice cream on top there. How do you prefer your pie? We're going to talk a lot about pie today, but super curious. How do you like your pie?
Well, it depends. Generally speaking, when I'm judging pie competitions, I want the pie. I don't want ice cream, whipped cream, creme fraiche, or cheese on it. It has to stand on its own merits. It depends on the pie. There's no question that warm apple pie with whipped cream or ice cream is a beautiful thing. But if you've never tried it, a really sharp cheddar cheese melted on top or incorporated into the crust is a wonderful thing. And what I've always loved about pie is the way that it brings people together, and that's kind of been a driving force for me.
Yeah, like food does. Absolutely love that. So I'm really excited to chat with you this morning. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at years of experience. So I'm going to ask you to be patient with me. Just go easy. I listened yesterday, or maybe the day before, I listened to your beautiful little chat with Chef Daniel Asher from here in Boulder, and our very own chef instructor, Suzanne Pendergast, who has been with Escoffier for years. It was so good, so playful, so thoughtful, so respectful, so fun. How does someone get so comfortable with the microphone as you appear to be?
Well, it helps if you've been doing it for 30 or 40 years. There were some weeks when I didn't sound so cool, so together, or so organized. But some of that is practice over the years. I first started doing food radio at KGNU in 1985.
Wow.
I had this idea of doing something like a Prairie Home Companion, except about food. I called it the Generic Gourmet Show. And it was on for a number of years. It was like a food variety show. And I just had always loved radio. And I would say, the way that you get comfortable with that, of course, is doing a lot of it. The best place to do something like that is KGNU, which is Boulder's 45-year-old public radio station. They have classes in using the technology. You can intern. And also, let's speak directly to anyone who's, say, younger than 40 or maybe less. I often say what I do is I do a podcast that happens to be broadcast live, because if I say the word radio, they fall asleep because they don't know what it is.
What about I promise I'm going off script here quite a bit, but it's fascinating to me. What about just this recent phenomena called the pandemic? How did you find yourself pivoting during that time?
For me, it was genuinely horrifying as a food person. It really brought to light a lot of the endemic, the problems in the food supply system, local food sheds and everything else that came up because of that. Personally, about a week after it started, Nibbles went on what we like to call hiatus. In other words, they said, we don't have any advertising from restaurants and stuff. And so Nibbles went away. Yeah. Nibbles went away for a year, which was challenging, but there was always a desperate need for information about how restaurants were doing and how people could find eggs, things like that.
So one thing that I was not aware of, and both of us being here in the area, we have had our fair share of rain in the last 10 days. Bittersweet, right? I love it. We need it. It's as green as I've ever seen it. But what about the golf course? Have you been out there yet?
Actually, I've been talking to some golf people, and they say it's a real challenge.
Yeah.
When you have 20 acres of turf to mow, and it's growing really fast. All of the farmers are complaining, and they need help because the weeds are growing in between the tomato plants.
Yeah.
And my personal problem, since I live in Louisville, is that I'm afraid that all of this stuff is going to grow, and then in August it's going to turn brown, and it's going to become a fire danger.
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't happen.
No.
But what this all means, though, I just wrote a column about getting help fermenting foods and preserving food, because it's just this is going to be a stunning year for local produce. And I'm always encouraging people, figure out how to make pickles or kimchi or salt away stuff, or dry it or freeze it, or so that in October you can have a rhubarb pie.
No, absolutely. For our listeners, I just want to reemphasize, if you haven't got that hint already, that John is our go-to person for hot eateries and all food trends in Colorado. And I'm sure you get these questions a lot, like, John, where should I go eat? What's in season? What should I do? So a couple of questions that are going to put you on the spot. Where's the most recent place that you dined?
I dined at a place called Pupusa Lovers 2. It's on Arapahoe, right across from Safeway. It's in this very cool corner that includes Rincon, Argentina, a French cafe, a good bakery, and a Montreal-style bagel place. But what I love about Pupusa Lovers 2 is that most of us who've encountered Salvadoran, Central American food have had pupusas, and and that was about it. It was sort of a tamale alternative. If you go to this restaurant, you can sample all the other cool things, different kinds of enchiladas, different kinds of tamales, different kind of horchata. So it's very interesting.
Is there and again, I don't know if you're at liberty to share, what's the hot spot in Boulder right now?
Got me. It's very hard to tell anymore. you
How
know.
about around us? Where do you like to go? 'Cause you live in Louisville, right? I'm right on the border. I'm right there by you, Indian Peaks area there. Where do you like to go by us?
You mean out in Louisville and Lafayette?
Yeah, yeah.
It's an incredibly exciting time
Isn't
out
it?
here.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, people have this misunderstanding about Louisville and Lafayette in terms of the food that's available. They have these, they assume it's either bad Italian or, regular Mexican.
Yeah.
And some wonderful things are happening. Just take Lafayette, for instance. Hate to go back to pies, but there's a fine New Zealand style pie shop on Public Road called
Yeah.
Tip Top Pies. Right next to it is Teocalli,
Yeah,
which
I've
is
been
a
there. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
superior tacos, and there's just a bunch of new places that have come in and really enhance things.
I love it. All these little plugs locally. Yeah,
So let me
I've
tell you,
been.
that's my raison d'etre. It always has been.
Yeah.
It is saying there's great stuff locally.
Yeah.
And what's nice now compared to 40 years ago when I started is that
Yeah.
there's really a lot to talk about. You
What
got to
about
understand.
Denver? Do you venture to Denver much or?
A little bit,
Yeah.
but let's see. The place I have been to lately, although I didn't get to eat, was Casa Bonita.
Yeah. Everybody's been to Casa Bonita of late, right? And when are
Yeah,
they going to open up?
well, in a few weeks. I
Yeah.
was My old friend Loca, Dana Rodriguez, is the chef for Casa Bonita. So I have no doubt that it'll be 1,000% better than the crappy, disgusting stuff that was served the last time I was there in the mid 1990s. But they're being very Hollywood about it, and they're not, So I haven't tasted anything. And what I was pleased though was that they preserved somehow. I'm not sure it's a good idea, but they preserved Casa Bonita in all its 1973 glory. But there's no sign of South Park anywhere in the restaurant.
No, no, probably by design, but yeah, I can't remember the last time I went, but boy, I don't know that there's been more excitement about a restaurant opening in the state of Colorado in a long time.
It
Um,
was ludicrous, really.
yeah, yeah,
And
and
initially, it'll be very hard to get in there. So I didn't actually get to eat in there. Uh,
and for
but
our listeners, right, the unique attraction to Casa Bonita is the fact that there's divers within the building while you're dining. So it's an interesting draw for sure, right?
It really is. It's a very distinctive. It was part of a trend towards entertainment. I don't know if you
Yeah,
remember this, but
sure. Yeah, yeah.
when I originally wrote about Casa Bonita, I also wrote about Hollow World, which was an entertainment place in South Denver built around a volcano that spewed stuff.
Oh
And
wow.
there was another one that was jungle oriented, and so this is a long tradition of trying to fuse entertainment and food.
While we're talking about that, having dined a lot over the years and written a lot over the years about the various places you've dined, what specifically, John, stands out to you about the gastronomic scene here in Colorado? Not just Boulder, not just the corridor between Boulder and Denver, but Colorado. What's our food statement here?
I think it goes back to the same thing that distinguishes a lot of characteristics of life in Colorado. I just finished a story about the birth of fast casual dining in Colorado, which was
Mm-hmm.
also the birth of fast casual dining in America. And it was the same thing. It's the same thing I hear from brewers and distillers, that because everybody in Colorado, most people in Colorado are from someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
They come here. I've been here a long time, but I'm not from here. And it breeds a different kind of spirit of entrepreneurial activity and in our case, collaboration. I came from Massachusetts, new was an ugly word. People didn't like new. If you hadn't been there since 1600, then you were the new kids on the block. And it tends to inhibit creativity. And people come here from all over the world and set up shop. And usually they start with restaurants. And so I think that has been a unique thing. It's allowed a tremendous amount of creativity as immigrants, whether they're from Vietnam or from the Midwest, do cool things. The other thing that's unique here is this remarkable spirit of collaboration. Chefs are always jumping in together to aid in various benefits. Breweries team up to co-brew beers and lend each other equipment. And so I think that's been a really distinguishing characteristic. That and the fact that we live in an incredibly beautiful place that everybody wants to visit.
Well said. Well said. Moving to that theme of cook to food writer, if you will, I was reading an article recently that you wrote for Boulder Weekly. It was entitled Mom's Kitchen Table. And in that article, you mentioned, and I quote, "It all started with lasagna. I credit my career as a print and radio journalist to daily vocabulary tests, 4 years of Latin, and many attempted poems during 6 years of formal education. I'm grateful to everyone who made me possible." I love that. However, one individual is responsible for the fact that I've spent most of those decades as a food writer, food editor, dining critic, pie authority, and most importantly, a host, my mom. So take us back to the beginning. I love this story. It gets emotional on and tell us how your mom helped you realize your love for food and then how that transcended to sharing that knowledge with others through critique or collaboration, as you mentioned, or just simple conversation.
So I'd take you back to probably the 1960s into the early 70s. I grew up in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, which is a dying mill town, in a big old house. In the center of the house was always the kitchen. I wanted to talk to Mom. I needed to be in the kitchen. And I ended up helping because I felt like, I should help. But I was also curious. Cooking seemed like I was interested in chemistry too. How did this work? And it just wasn't apparent to me that I wasn't supposed to be doing that because I was a guy. The same thing happened to me later when I became the first male food editor in Colorado. I was sitting there and I always loved lasagna. And my mother said, "Well, why don't you make the lasagna?" Because she was busy with 5 kids, and so she handed me the box of Prince spaghetti, lasagna noodles, and I got in there, and it had hard-boiled eggs in it. I thought that was unusual at the time. Sort of a relative of poached eggs and tomato and shakshuka, which is a kind of a similar flavor arrangement. But so I did that, and then I started, helping with other things and learning other things, including how to make my family's famous Italian sausage and mashed potato stuffing at Thanksgiving, which I wrote about over the years. My maternal grandfather was an Italian grocer in Connecticut, made wonderful spicy Italian sausage, and my grandmother had never seen a turkey, didn't know how to stuff it, and ended up going to a French Canadian neighbor and who told her, "Well, why don't you fill it with the stuff that we put in a pie in Canada, a tortillere, pork pie." And so she combined mashed potatoes and ground sausage, put that in the turkey, And that's how traditions are made. And so, at that point, I didn't think, oh, I'm going to become a food editor, writer. That was not in the cards. That wasn't what I was thinking. I wanted to be a poet.
Mhm.
Um, Unfortunately, when I arrived in Boulder, all the poet jobs were taken. And so I ended up working in a whole bunch of restaurants. I had done a little bit of that in high school and college, to make money.
Well,
And
yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to tie in. You graduated with a communications and English degree from McGill University of Montreal, and then you moved to Boulder. How did the sojourn to Montreal occur?
Well, young people, let me take you back to
You're a storyteller. I love it.
well,
I need some cocoa. Yeah.
it was 1972. I was at draft age. That's the
Yeah.
story.
Gotcha.
And McGill University in Montreal was the best university I was um, accepted at. And I was in Montreal from 72 to 76. And got a wonderful education. And thankfully, I didn't have to become a Canadian.
And is this what you wanted to do then? You ended up in Boulder in the restaurant industry.
No, I wanted to write.
You wanted to write.
You know what I wanted to do? I wanted to be a rock music critic.
Oh,
I wanted to go to concerts for free. I wanted to get records, those round vinyl things, sent to me in the mail, and I wanted to interview my musical heroes. And so that was really my main thrust. So I started writing for a bunch of publications that are now defunct in Boulder, including the Colorado Daily, and was able to, pursue that. But what I kept finding was that everybody was interested in food. I was working at restaurants in Boulder, and I said, well, I can write about food. What do you need? And that's kind of how that started, and that blossomed into the radio show. And I started looking for different ways that I could use my culinary interest to make a living. I taught cooking classes. I catered. A lot of different things.
now I love that you brought up music. And the majority of the guests that we have on the show are thought leaders in the food space, right? Whether they're chefs or farmers, food writers, so on and so forth. And I typically, if given the opportunity, I slide in there. Oh, so motorcycles, music, and food, which or all of the above, right? And for many, right, it is all of the above. So since you mentioned music, would you be open to giving me your podium? Top 3 bands of all time?
Oh, that's a very challenging thing.
Yeah.
What I'm again, if you Google Lehndorff and bluegrass, you'll come up with this other wealth of unfood related material. I'm a thought leader in the progressive bluegrass world.
Okay, that's great.
Um, so but on the other hand, I also went to 30 or 40 Grateful Dead concerts in my time, and I love classical music. My dad had a string quartet that practiced in our living room.
I love
He
it.
was, he was
That's
from Vienna. He was from Vienna. This was very different.
yeah.
And I just I love music. I'm just working on a story right now about the great new artists that are going to be at Rocky Grass in Lyons in July. But if I had to, I guess, boy, that is
It's a great question, right?
it is. Well, I can name off 30 or 40 people that I wish everyone would listen to, but that's different.
It's funny how things. The other day, I watched Letterman with you a documentary on YouTube, but they had asked Letterman to kind of host it, and it had less to do with music and more to do with the culture and this, the spirit of Ireland and the members of. I've seen you two countless times. That's kind of my go-to. But yeah, I love that there's a place for music in our lives, right? So
And 40
I'm glad I
years
asked the
ago,
question. Yeah.
40 years ago today, U2 played at Red Rocks
Yes,
in
yes.
the rain, and resulted in one of the greatest live albums and videos ever shot.
Ever. Oh my God, John, the chills that just went up my spine. Can I tell you just completely crazy random story? So I happened to be, I've traveled around a little bit too, but at the time my family had a small hotel in between Gunnison and Crested Butte, that area there. And I had a restaurant that I was operating there. And for whatever reason, I ended up in Denver with a friend. And I wanted to show the friend Red Rocks. And guess who was practicing and rehearsing the day before that concert you just mentioned? And we
No.
sat there and listened. It was rough, right? Because sound checks and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Wasn't really even sure who they were, but unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'll take that one to the grave. But I didn't have any pictures, nothing, right? It was a long,
Right.
long time ago. Yeah.
Because
Unbelievable.
we didn't have cell phones, and it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. So let's stay on this. How did you transition into hosting radio shows and I'm going someplace with this, right? And becoming a full-time award-winning, I might mention, food editor and writer. How did that make, because I really want to come back to, for some who will listen, some students that'll listen to this chat and love food, but not really have an interest in becoming the chef, right? If you will, but they'd love to write about food, perhaps in the freelance capacity of some sort. So coming back to your journey, perhaps add a few sprinkles of what steps people should take if they wanted to kind of land where you did.
Well, as always, it was one of those long and winding roads. Pardon the musical reference there. But so I was very interested in writing, in poetry and journalism and other things. And I was in Boulder and pursuing that. And I started writing for anybody and anyone who would allow me to write stories for them, including this very strange publication called the Tank Works Weekly. It was built around a company that had sensory deprivation tanks that you floated in, the saltwater tanks, and isolation tanks. And they eventually were arrested for a Ponzi scheme, but they said, you can write about anything you want, John. And I started developing, I decided, I can be a reporter. I'm a good reporter, and, I do that. But what I wanted people to notice my name and hopefully learn how to spell it, which hasn't happened. But I wanted to use the word I. I wanted it to be personal. I was inspired by people like Calvin Trillin, who wrote Alice Let's Eat, and other people who were in new journalism who were recording how life was being lived. And I saw food as a venue to do that. So I was looking for different ways to do that. I was working for all different kinds of publication. And it's an equally long story, but because I got antibiotics when I was a little kid, my teeth were soft. Okay. I got into my late 20s, and my dentist in Boulder said, "Hey, John, I know you're having fun freelancing and writing, cooking and stuff, but you need to get a serious job for a while because you're going to need 26 crowns in the next 3 years or 4, That's how I ended up taking a job with the Daily Camera.
Okay.
And they were willing to hire me as the food editor. And up until that time, most people don't realize that in newspapers, the food pages were called the women's pages. And most of the food editors were women, and the audience was women, and it was wrapped around supermarket ads. And but they hired me and said, let's do something new with food. And so that, that's how I entered the mainstream. So I spent 15 years as a food editor because I got used to being paid and having benefits.
In your opinion, John, again, coming back to others who would love to, and maybe even more contemporary, right? The bloggers and influencers on social media. You mentioned earlier how important that is. What are some of those essential, to use upon essential ingredients when it comes to being, not only thoughtful, but a top-notch food journalist?
Well, having all of these experiences in writing and food, wherever you can, by all means, take classes, learn how to cook something you don't know how to cook. Read, just leaf through cookbooks just to see how recipes are done. Or if you can't stand actually you're looking at a book, there's certainly plenty of that online. All that feeds in. As I was saying, what drove me was that food was looked on as cooking when I started, and I said food is everything. Food is history. Food is personal. Food is political. Food is farmers, and
it's wellness and community today. Yeah.
And it's artisan crafters, and it's so I saw this humongous world of food to be covered in a lot of different ways, and that's the way I approached it. And I think that there's so many opportunities out there. What's important is not the medium, which has changed in many different ways. It really is the message and how you're connecting to people. I'm not a spring poultry here. And one of the beautiful things about this job is that it's forced me to become at least marginally technologically savvy. I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I have several Facebook sites, I have my own webpage. I found that if I do videos, I get 1,000 times more reaction than if I just do something in print or just with a photo. There's so many new opportunities that didn't exist before for students, people who are interested in food. I'll start with maybe people who don't want to work in a restaurant or be a chef. But there are so many venues now, companies who have these food companies that are trying to reach out to their customers, to their diners. So there's opportunities in that. There's nonprofit groups that are pursuing various soil and regenerative agriculture issues. And then there's, people that just want to learn how to cook something, or you have a particular interest. And it's if you have this passion for something, regardless of what it is related to food, there's probably other people you can connect with
and impact. Yeah.
Right. So but for the I do want to speak to all of the students who are there at the school sharpening their knives and learning proper poaching technique. If nobody ever comes to eat your truffle poached capon, then chances are you ain't going to make it in a very difficult business. Yeah. You have to be able to let people know, and part of that, most especially startup restaurants aren't going to be hiring media professionals to do the work. So chances are it's going to be you. And it's just simply, it's more than taking pictures of a dish and saying, we got this on the menu tonight. It's weaving a narrative. It goes back to my original inspirations, which are storytelling, and those stories that connect us all. And if you can share yourself through the food that you're serving, the stories of the farmers, uh, if you can bring people in for a tasting and then send them home with information, all of those things are involved with writing, talking, media, and things like podcasts, which can reach a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I'm going to jump a little bit onto the food critic piece, which is so fascinating to me. You've reviewed hundreds of restaurants for Rocky Mountain News, and that doesn't just happen overnight, right? You have to build trust and credibility and validate yourself. And John, in 2007, there was a beautiful film called Ratatouille that hit the screens, and honestly, I still watch it today. From
So
linguine, what's that?
So well done,
So
in all the details too.
right. From linguine, the star, to Anton Ego, the food critic. Everything was beautiful. Even the rats in a crazy kind of way. It was a very culinary friendly movie, right? Thomas Keller served as a consultant. And in the most important scene, I thought about this a lot before I knew I was going to chat with you. Anton Ego tries, a simple dish from Linguini and Remy, a simple dish called ratatouille. And there's that moment, right, which immediately sends him to his childhood, right? Almost puts him in a fetal position, right? He almost starts crying. Have you had?
I'm going to start crying. I'm going to start crying just remembering it.
It's beautiful, right? It's beautiful. Have you had an experience like that while dining and critiquing, that something that just took you back to your childhood?
Oh, all the time.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, obviously, especially when I'm eating either Italian food on the one side or Central European food on the other, because that's kind of what I grew up with. But certain dishes, my mother, at the time I was a Catholic growing up, my mother used to poach eggs in spaghetti sauce and serve it over pasta. So almost inevitably, when I have shakshuka or all the variations on baked and coddled and other eggs and with tomatoes, I'm right back there on a Friday night.
I love
and
that.
there aren't the era of the dining critic has passed. I was just talking to Ruth Reichel, who's a famous food writer, and I said, do we need restaurant critics anymore? And she, essentially said, like, I know nobody can afford to hire a dining critic anymore, but what we do need are as many journalists as possible providing accurate information in a AI driven age of misinformation.
Yeah.
So, but the difference is when I was a dining critic, I was anonymous. I wasn't a public person. I had my career had led to that point where I had the legitimacy to review places, and all I wanted to do was tell people whether they were going to get a good deal for their money, whether it was going to be a good experience.
Yeah.
So I had a credit card with a different name on it. I had friends make reservations so the number couldn't be traced, and I had to steal menus because there were no cell phones and there was no internet to get menus. All in an interest of me being treated like you. And as a result, I had many incredible experiences and some just profoundly awful. And the difference between the vast majority of restaurants, which everybody served okay food for the most part, and the places that I remember so well, it was all the service from the moment you walk in to the moment you leave, from everybody, from the chef to the waiter to, you know, it always came down to service.
I'm sure you've read Unreasonable Hospitality already.
I know about
Yes,
it, yeah.
I love it. I love it. You know, I'm going to be with Ruth. I haven't met her yet, but I'm going to be with her in September at a really cool event in Ohio with the Chef's Garden called Roots, where they bring farmers, chefs, and journalists together for a few days of exactly what we're doing, just experiencing food and friendship and all of that. So I'll keep you posted on that. I'm really excited about it.
And you know, she's in town next week.
What is she doing in town?
She's going to be at Chautauqua Auditorium. She has a new documentary on the scary state of the national food scene. And I'm going to moderate a audience Q&A and talk back after the screening at Chautauqua on
Wow.
June 14th.
All right. So, you know, I'm sending you an email right after this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Hey, let's talk about you a little bit more, John. A day in the life of a multi-hyphenate, if you will. Am I saying that right? I'm like,
Yes.
and it sounds worse than it is, right? You're just a person that juggles a lot of stuff, right? So what's on your plate today as an independent food writer, an editor, and you know, so much more. You know, next week what you'll be hosting. And not everyone trusts anyone to host an event like that. So I'm just really curious of what a day in the life feels like.
Well, it starts with vast quantities of good coffee early in the morning. It's really an essential component to all of this. And
are you picky? Do you need to go down to Boxcar, or will any coffee do?
nah, that's too expensive. I'm a journalist, so
Okay.
I did go to Ozo Coffee and take a class in how to make better drip coffee. I
Oh,
wrote
nice.
wrote a column about it, and that
Yeah.
was good. But starts with that. This morning, let's see. Early in the morning, I was finishing up a story that I was due yesterday, so I was late, for a magazine called Avid Lifestyle. It's the monthly magazine for the southern suburbs of Denver. They asked me to write a story about late summer margaritas, and so I searched around and found 3 places that do have different takes on margaritas, and got a recipe from one of them. That also required me to get photos from them that were good to use in a magazine, and to write 500 stunning words. So I turned that in, but at the same time, I was also late on my Nibbles column for Thursday, which was an extended interview I did with Ruth Reichel. And it always sounds easy, you know. So last week I did a Zoom with Ruth, and then I took it and I dropped it into Otter AI, which produced a transcript, and then I edited that and incorporated it into my column. I finally got that in this morning. After I did a Zoom with the head nutritionist for the LPGA, the golf people, about what to eat on the course for my fairways column for avid golfer. And then this afternoon, I'm continuing to work on that. I'm going to do a Zoom with a female member of the golf team at CU this evening. And I also needed to confirm my guests for Radio Nibbles on Thursday. It's going to be 2 of the founders of, or not founders, but 2 folks from the Sink restaurant.
Oh,
Boulder,
yeah.
celebrating its 100th anniversary. June 14th, they're showing a documentary on the Sink at the Boulder Theater. and I was interviewed for that documentary because I worked at the sink for a year one night,
What?
if you know what I mean.
That's all it took, right? That's all it took.
I realized that wasn't quite the spot for me. This is back in the late 70s, probably.
Did you say 100 years for the sink?
Yeah, it's
Wow.
100 years. Yeah.
What? That's that, and that's on the 14th as well. As long as
Yeah. I mean, I originally
Wow.
I was going to go to that and see
You're
myself.
double booked. You're double
Well,
booked.
yeah, after 3 years of nada.
Yeah,
Nothing.
yeah,
Nowhere.
it's all coming. It's coming 100 miles an hour.
Yeah. Anyway, yes. So that's what my days are like. I'm looking ahead and saying, well, my next Nibbles column is going to be a walkabout through the Longmont Market. Eventually, I want to do something on upscaled hot dogs. Thinking ahead for my column, for my radio show, I want to get somebody in to talk about fermentation. So it's in order to be a independent contractor like this, you have to be able to be organized, juggle a lot of different things, and have some fun, hopefully, in the process.
Fun is important. Fun is important, and so is storytelling. It's an art form, right? And you've certainly mastered that. It takes a certain set of skills, and you've been at your craft since the late 70s. So
here's what I'd say about the storytelling thing.
Yeah.
Some of my editors used to talk about what they called a Lehndorff lead. And if you are bored or something, you go through 20 or 30 of my columns or stories, I spend more time working on the first 3 sentences than I do on the rest of it combined. It has to sing. It has to drag you into past the first word, to the second sentence, to the third paragraph. It has to make you want to read it. And for that, you have to see how storytellers tell stories.
And again, I'm asking for secrets and at the risk of getting emotional. So lots of stories and events that you've covered, many that probably tugged at the heartstrings. Were there any, or at least one, absolutely unbelievably memorable event that you covered, wrote about, shared, that impacted your career?
Well, I sort of have a couple of different things. The one event that touched me incredibly deeply was the death of Jerry Garcia. I was in the newsroom that day, and I was forced to write a front page obituary. I mean, there was a news story about how Jerry had died, but I was supposed to get some meaning out of it, and that was hard. The thing that impacted my career the most was, I guess it was in the mid '90s, a restaurant called Rioja opened in Denver.
Yes.
Jennifer Jasinski, wonderful chef, and
Yeah.
her team, including Dana Rodriguez, who's now a famous chef at Casa Bonita. And a friend of mine proposed that I follow the course of what it takes to create and get a new restaurant open. I spent a year following Jennifer and all the folks there. It was called something different originally. It looked very different originally. There were different people involved. And it was an ugly construction, and I got to be able to chronicle that, and it eventually came out as a standalone special section without any advertising that captured that whole thing until opening night at Rioja, when they started serving those fig-filled beignets and all that great stuff that Jennifer came up with.
When was that? What year was that?
I can look it up and even send you a link if you like.
Yeah, I ate there, through my travels, I was in Chicago for a long time, came back in 2014 and was at Rioja within, 2 weeks. And but I had eaten there previously, and I just can't remember. I'm trying to. There was an incredible restaurant for years. I think it was called the European Cafe. Does that sound right?
Roddick Cherney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I used
What
anytime.
what a character.
Yeah.
Jesus.
But what a great place. Remember, it had the big velvet sort of half moon seats and the plates. I had never seen such colorful, nothing matched, right? It was almost chaotic. And the food was lovely. I mean, so I'm talking the 90s, right?
Right.
So stuff was extravagant.
And the best mashed potatoes in the world.
Yeah. Boy, the memories are great. Hey, let's transition to pies. This was new for me. I didn't realize that you were Dr. Pie. Your website says that you're a recognized pie authority. I love pie. Tell me. I mean, take this.
How did that happen?
Take this time for a plug too, right? Let's plug pies. How did you enter the glorious world of pies? What intrigued you? How'd you become a judge? How can listeners stay up to date with you specifically on pies and what's going on?
Well, obviously I grew up with pie. I have a very strong memory of there was some special event at my parents' house, when I was growing up, and they had a pie there, and they said, "You can have one piece, but don't have any more." So I had a normal relationship with pie and made a few in my time. But this story is really about beer.
Okay, pie and beer. I'm okay with that. Yeah. You have my attention.
This was back in the probably 80s. I have a friend, Charlie Papazian. He's recognized internationally as the father of the craft brew movement, as well as the American homebrewing boom, which led to the craft brewing environment. At the time, he had been a nuclear engineer, and he was teaching at a Montessori school in Boulder. And his birthday was coming up. Kids wanted to bake him a cake, and he went like this. He said, "No, I only eat pie on my birthday." And his birthday was January 23rd. And he said, "Well, as a class project, we're going to declare my birthday National Pie Day."
Wow.
And he did through the organization that was doing that kind of thing at the time. And he got me interested in pie and celebrating National Pie Day. And we held the National Pie Championships in Boulder, and had the Great American Pie Festival, which was modeled on the Great American Beer Festival, which started in Boulder by Charlie. And that was just fine. And but Charlie had this tendency to go to Thailand or Brazil to drink beer in January. So he said, "Why don't you be in charge of National Pie Day and take the calls?" And so I ended up talking to people from coast to coast on National Pie Day about pie and why it's wonderful. And so I became a pie proselytizer, evangelist, and I ultimately became the executive director of. See, that was the American Pie Council was a mythical organization. We had to come up with a name for it. It got taken over by corporate pie interests, including the maker of most of the pie pans that most of the pies in America go in. It eventually got taken over by those interested parties, and so I've ended up having this marvelous hobby, which at various times I tried to turn into a career and failed. But I love it. And so I write about it still. And whenever I start writing for a new publication, I always somehow talk them into letting me write a new pie story. And I talk about it on the radio. And I have a wonderful Facebook group page, which I invite everyone to join, called the Global Pie Society. We have members, we have a pie shop, an American pie shop in Copenhagen. We have another one. We have a pie shop in Zagreb, Mexico, Canada, New Zealand. There's people all over the world that have a relationship with pie, and this sort of provides them with a forum for all the kind of nerdy stuff that you would think you would end up, should you use an aluminum pie guard to protect the crimp? Should you use lard or butter? Can you substitute, can you really make a good tasting gluten-free pie crust? All those kinds of things. And I just constantly discover new stuff about pie and our relationship with it, pie in popular culture, in movies and songs. I mean, it's amazing.
I love it. I love it. Let's move on to what I think you're going to focus on. But, the name of our podcast is The Ultimate Dish. And if I ask John what his ultimate dish is, are we going the pie route or are we going a different route?
For me, it'd be hard not to go for wild blueberry pie.
Oh my gosh, I'm in.
Because, and not just blueberry pie, but wild blueberry. It's a significant difference. It strikes so many chords on my taste buds, in my memory. I remember what it took to collect enough low bush blueberries to actually make a pie, and it's not easy, and you get bit a lot. So there definitely is that. So my guess, I think that would probably be it. But a year ago, or last October, unexpectedly, I had spinal fusion surgery. All right.
Okay.
So I ended up in the hospital. I went to rehab. I went back to the hospital. I went back to rehab. It was not an experience I would recommend, and the food was truly abysmal. And the one thing I kept thinking about was real bread and real butter. And at some point, somebody brought me a baguette and some European butter, and it was better than all the painkillers and muscle relaxants and everything else I was taking to cope with the situation. And so, that's a pretty wonderful thing too. Of course, a little bit of, ripe camembert, from Colorado is not a bad thing either.
That doesn't hurt. That I have to say, you just ascended to the top of the podium. It's the most beautiful ultimate dish story we've ever heard. And I'm not surprised. John, Lehndorff.
I bet people will learn how to spell it.
They will learn how to spell it. I've got the double consonants as well as you. And I loved your storytelling today. And I loved how you weave a narrative. There's lots of TikTok in our chat today. And I'm going to reach out to you real soon because I want to keep this friendship going. We have lots of cool stories that happen here that I think that you can turn into beautiful prose if you wish. But thanks for what you do for the Boulder community, and thanks for chatting with us a little bit today. You're a beautiful person.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope that you and the students will come down to KGNU and visit us, and we'll keep this going.
Thank you for listening to the Ultimate Dish Podcast, brought to you by Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Visit escoffier.edu/podcast, where you'll find any materials mentioned during the podcast, including notes, links, and other resources. You can also browse other episodes and subscribe.